Reality TV star Kim Kardashian West hopes to convince President Trump to spare the life of federal death row inmate Brandon Bernard. Unless the president intervenes, Bernard will be put to death on December 10th. Bernard was just 18 years old in 1999 when he and four other teens kidnapped and murdered youth ministers Todd and Stacey Bagley before dumping the couple in a remote area of Fort Hood, Texas.
I would first want to tell the Bagleys that I was sorry.
In a video made by his legal defense team, Bernard apologized for his role in the crime.
I would like to tell them that I have tried to be a better person since that day.
Bernard and one of his co-defendants, 19-year-old Christopher Villalba, were sentenced to death while the other accomplices received long prison sentences. Villalba was convicted of firing the shot that killed Todd Bagley and shooting Stacey Bagley in the face. And according to defense attorneys, Bernard was just doing what Villalba ordered when he set the Bagley's car on fire with the couple still inside. Bernard is expected to meet the same fate as Villalba, death by lethal injection. But celebrities like Kardashian are part of a groundswell of support who have come to his defense, arguing his life should be spared because he played a much lesser role than was alleged.
Well, the government put forward that Brandon was a leader. Brandon was a follower. He wasn't the initiator of this crime. He wasn't even present when the crime took place. He was playing video games in a store. So he's not present for the carjacking. He's not present for the robbery. He is present when Christopher Villalba shot both victims.
His attorneys argue he was immature, did not have adequate representation at trial, and that racial bias played a key role in punishment. Kardashian tweeted support for Bernard, saying although all 5 teens were black, 11 of the 12 jurors were white. This, coupled with the misleading and incomplete information the jury was given, deprived the boys of a fair trial.
The crime involved 5 black teenagers, and the victims were a male and female white couple. Statistics show that when the victims are white and the defendants are black, that there is more of a push for harsher sentences.
Many involved in the case agree. The prosecutor who sought the death penalty is now arguing to put a stop to his execution. In a November opinion piece in the Indianapolis Star, Angela Moore says, "We now know more about the immaturity of youthful brains," and she admits race was likely a factor in Bernard's punishment. In addition, 5 of the 9 surviving jurors who found Bernard guilty in 1999 have joined in asking President Trump to spare Bernard's life.
In the trial, we were told she was unconscious, but there was never anything that talked about if she felt any pain, if there was any suffering. And knowing now, and if we would have had that information, that would have allowed us in the sentencing for Brandon to be able to, I would have been able to vote in good conscience life rather than death for Mr. Bernard.
Attorneys for Brandon Bernard also say new information suggests the government suppressed the opinion of a gang expert who said Bernard occupied the very lowest position in the gang. In his 20 years plus on death row at a federal prison, his attorneys say he has been a model prisoner.
I can't imagine how they feel about losing their family. And I wish that we can all go back and change it. And I'm sorry for all the pain that I caused.
Again, they were seeking a stay of execution today, but the trial court did not allow it. The judge did not allow it. Let's bring in CourtTV anchor Julie Grant and CourtTV special contributor Ashley Banfield. Julie, I'll start with you. I know you've been digging into this a little bit today, the ruling. What exactly were his attorneys arguing today?
So, Vinny, we know that Brandon Bernard was a gang member, and his attorneys are arguing about how he was portrayed to the jury as a member of that gang. They're arguing that he was not portrayed accurately in the gang's hierarchy. And this is how a member of his defense team describes it to CourtTV. Let's watch.
Well, the government put forward that Brandon was a leader. Brandon was a follower. He wasn't the initiator of this crime. He wasn't even present when the crime took place. He was playing video games in a store. So he's not present for the carjacking. He's not present for the robbery. He is present when Christopher Villalba shot both victims. But the jury believed that he had the potential to pose a danger while in prison.
Now, he did purchase the lighter fluid and he did set that car on fire. And we know that one of the victims, Stacey Bagley, died from smoke inhalation. Now, Bernard's defense filing accuses the state of hiding some evidence from the state's gang expert who gave testimony at trial. The defense team says that they became aware of this evidence in 2018. But in the court's ruling today, this ruling, the opinion by Judge Sweeney from the U.S. District Court in the Southern District of Indiana, says this was not enough to stop the execution. He said in the opinion, in part, it's common for defendants to argue they were a minor player, and Mr. Bernard was free to do the same during his sentencing phase, despite where he actually fell in the hierarchy. But evidence of the gang's hierarchy would not have significantly undermined the government's case for a death sentence. To be sure, the government emphasized Mr. Bernard's mere membership in the gang. The opinion goes on to say, the government's prison gang expert testified that if a prisoner comes into the prison system and the Bloods want to recruit him, he has to be the low man on the totem pole. But this lowly status does not make a new inmate less likely to commit violent crime. On the contrary, he must prey on the weak, commit assaults, traffic drugs, and sanction hits if necessary and carry them out so he can make bones and advance within the prison gang. So essentially, the court is saying here that the absence of this information from the gang expert and what was testified to doesn't ultimately go to the defense, and even pointing out that what the government did establish, mere membership is enough. So essentially, he's saying that the standard here, Mr. Bernard would have to show that no reasonable juror would have sentenced him to death in light of this evidence. And the court is saying that's just not the case. Still committed a brutal murder here where these two were robbed, kidnapped, terrorized, and ultimately murdered. And his part in that, lighting that car on fire, buying the lighter fluid, as I mentioned, lighting the car on fire. And as you mentioned, Vinny, one of the victims who was shot by another co-defendant who's already been put to death, she was alive. She was alive in that trunk. Final minutes of her life, locked in a trunk, shot, and died ultimately from smoke inhalation. Just a horrific story, Vinny, just horrific circumstances in which the Bagleys died.
Ashley, you know, I'm listening to what the defense is saying, and one of their themes seems to be that minimization, right? And I'm hearing something that sounds a little disturbing, to me at least. And, you know, he's not a leader. He's just a follower. I mean, he's just following orders. We don't have that defense anymore, right? That's pretty much been eliminated.
Yeah, we don't have that defense. And if I were the Bagleys family members, I could probably pull the lever myself. I often say that. That said, when it comes to the death penalty, you don't get a mulligan, and therefore there are rules. And so, you know, Julie and Michael's reporting is important. The fact that they discovered in 2018 that there was discovery that they didn't get, that's breaking the rules, and it's not right. And maybe, you know, the viewers might look at this and say, well, too bad, you know, he still did it. But that's not the way our legal system works either, right, Vinny? Rules are rules, and we don't have that defense, right? You can't just say, well, I was just a little player. That's not part of the rules. It's also not part of the rules to sit on discovery, especially when you're talking about death. Like I said, it doesn't get more serious than that. I'm not weighing in here on what that man did. It's despicable. And I would feel as much vengeance as I'm sure those connected to those poor Badgley victims would feel. The system is the system. And we have to stick with the system. If we're going to have it, you got to be as pristine as possible if you're going to use the ultimate penalty.
So, Julie, what's the next legal move for his defense team now that they lost today?
Right. So they're going to continue. They're going to continue trying to bring challenges. I mean, Vin, I think another thing important to note here is they have exhausted every legal avenue available. I mean, they've been appealing and appealing and appealing for years. This is just one other legal instrument they're trying to use as a last-ditch effort. And now their team has told us that their next move is to try to file something in the 7th District located in Chicago. And at the same time, they're hoping that the pardon office at the White House will have President Trump consider commuting Bernard's death sentence, commuting it to a life in prison sentence without the possibility of parole. And of course, as mentioned in Michael's report, some advocates they've put forth a petition, a clemency petition. We know advocates like Kim Kardashian are being very vocal at this point about this, as the clock is ticking. We just have a matter of hours. And so they're going to continue and see if there's one other legal maneuver they can possibly have satisfied before Wednesday, or before Thursday, rather.
And there is another issue in all this. We know the world we're living in with COVID-19. And Ashley, I know you're kind of looking at that because, you know, to execute an execution, to actually pull off an execution, it takes people getting together and everything else. How is COVID-19 playing into that equation right now?
Big, big, big. And not just one of those whiny things like, let's call it off because of COVID. It's not that at all. It's something actually pretty significant. You're right, Vinny. It takes a village to kill someone. It takes about 100 people. That's how many additional people have to be brought to the Terre Haute, Indiana facility in order to carry out an execution. And that's creating some problems because they executed a guy by the name of Orlando Hall in November, brought in the team of 100. Within that team, you're probably wondering, my God, what could that possibly entail? That involves an execution team, usually 40 people who are very specialized in this. Additional security personnel have to be brought in. There are witnesses that need to be brought in as well as others. And so when they did that last month and executed Orlando Hall, 8 people on the execution team got COVID, and 5 of them are coming back for this execution. So this is a problem. And the ACLU is actually filing suit right now on behalf of the next 5 scheduled executions, as well as a few death row inmates who are at Terre Haute facility who are like, hey, don't expose us because of your business of killing the other inmates on the other ward. So they filed these lawsuits because of those 8 members of the execution team testing positive. 5 of them are still scheduled to come back Thursday, even though it's been only about 10 days or 2 weeks or so. I might have my count a little bit off, but the Bureau of Prisons says that they're within the CDC guidelines, bringing these formerly, positive COVID tested execution team members in. I do want to add one quick thing, and it's important, I think, for those who have mixed emotions about, what's going on here, not COVID related, but there are a number of jurors, 9 surviving jurors on the case who feel that this shouldn't happen, that the execution shouldn't happen, for what that's worth. I know they rendered their verdict, and you don't get a mulligan on that either if you're a juror, but they have all since felt as though they don't stand by their death sentence. Also, a former warden doesn't stand by this sentence either. And if you're wondering what Mr. Bernard has done in the 20 years he's been in prison, he's had a spotless record. He's devoted his life to steering at-risk youth away from crime and to studying the Bible, for what that's worth.
We shall see. I mean, Thursday, 6 o'clock is the deadline. And obviously, Court TV, we will stay on top of the story. Julie, Ashley, thank you both so much.